7 Power Dynamics that control your life without you knowing. I used to think my choices were mine. My career path, my relationships, my opinions. But the more I paid attention, the more I realized, half of what I believed was my decision was just me moving inside an invisible system. Like a pawn thinking it chose to move forward, while the board was already set before it was even born. And it's not paranoia. It's human nature psychology. It's the quiet architecture of power dynamics that shape your life, whether you're awake to them or not. The first time I saw it clearly was my own Muta one moment. That instant when reality cracks open just enough to show you the machinery behind the curtain. I was at a meeting, speaking up with what I thought was a breakthrough idea. My boss smiled politely. The room stayed neutral. Then 5 minutes later, someone else repeated the same idea, barely reworded, and suddenly it was brilliant. I felt the sting, but more than that, I felt the shift. The room wasn't reacting to the idea. They were reacting to the hierarchy. That's when I realized, truth doesn't rise to the top by itself. It has to climb through layers of unspoken social rules first. You can have the right answer and still lose if you don't understand the game theory in real life. And these dynamics aren't just in offices. They're in friendships, families, communities. They're woven into how people greet you, who interrupts you, who gets to take up more space without pushback. The most dangerous part? Most of it runs on autopilot. You can be manipulated without anyone even needing to think about it, because the system itself does the work. There's the proximity to power dynamic, where people orbit the ones they believe hold influence, hoping some of it will rub off. You think you're friends because of shared interests, but the truth is, in their mind, you're just closer to someone they want. Then there's gatekeeping, where one person positions themselves as the bridge to resources, information, or opportunities. They're not necessarily the source, but they make sure everything flows through them, so everyone has to play nice if they want access. And let's not pretend manipulation tactics are always aggressive. Sometimes they're coded in kindness. Benevolent control is when someone appears helpful, but their help always comes with a string attached: loyalty, debt, the unspoken expectation you'll return the favor when they call it in. The scary thing is, emotional intelligence can be used to comfort or to control. The same skill that makes someone an empathetic listener can also make them a master at steering your choices without you noticing. Social survival skills aren't just about getting along. They're about knowing when you're being subtly pushed. In every group, there's a mood setter, the one whose reactions dictate how everyone else feels. They don't have to speak much. A frown, a slow nod, a raised eyebrow, that's enough to shift the room. You might think you're acting freely, but part of you is checking their face before you commit. The hierarchy isn't always written down, but it's always there. Social hierarchy explained simply. Some people operate like hubs, others like spokes. If you're a spoke, your connection to the group exists through the hub, and that's fragile. Lose favor with the hub, and you're out, no matter how well you get along with everyone else. And it's easy to ignore this when everything's going well, but the moment there's conflict, you see where the real lines are drawn. Psychological manipulation doesn't always mean someone's scheming against you. It can mean they've learned, consciously or not, exactly what levers to pull to get what they want. Maybe they play helpless, so you step in and carry their load. Maybe they play overly competent, so you defer to them automatically. Either way, they're controlling the frame. And if you don't see the frame, you think it's just how things are. I learned the hard way that street smart skills matter more than book smarts when it comes to survival mindset. I used to believe merit was enough. Work hard, deliver results, and you'll win. But how to win in life isn't about merit alone, it's about alignment. Knowing who the decision makers listen to. Knowing whose opinion can sink you before you even speak. Knowing when to speak at all, and when silence will serve you more. And the cost of not seeing these dynamics? You burn out. You feel invisible. You get blindsided by outcomes that don't match your effort. You end up thinking you're the problem, when in reality, you are playing the wrong game on the wrong terms. There's also the loyalty test dynamic. Someone will subtly force you to choose sides, even if there's no real war. They'll frame neutrality as betrayal. It's not about the issue, it's about consolidating influence. Once you've picked a side, they know where you stand, and you're easier to manage. The thing that makes all of this so effective is that it's not loud. Power dynamics rarely announce themselves. They're quiet currents under the surface, pulling you without your consent. And if you're not paying attention, you'll think you're swimming, when really, you're drifting exactly where someone else wants you to go. It's in how someone decides who sits next to whom, in who gets the inside jokes, in who's allowed to bend the rules without consequence. It's in the subtle hesitation before someone shakes your hand. All of it is data. All of it is the language of power. And if you don't know how to read people, if you're not tuned into that first Muta one moment when the mask slips, you'll miss the truth entirely. What makes it worse is that some dynamics live inside you. You internalize them. You start censoring yourself before anyone else does. You avoid opportunities because you've already decided who's above you. That's the most dangerous manipulation tactic of all, the one you run on yourself. And when you finally start to see it, you can't unsee it. You'll catch the split-second glance between two people that tells you more than an hour of conversation ever could. You'll notice how decisions are made in the meeting, but the real agreement happened over coffee between two key players the day before. You'll feel the subtle pressure when someone gives you a compliment laced with a condition, the quiet signal that approval is provisional, depending on whether you stay in line. And then you'll start noticing the games you've been playing without consent. How often you've performed loyalty not because you believed in someone, but because you didn't want to lose access. How many times you've stayed silent to avoid triggering a mood setter, even when the truth was on your tongue. How you've adjusted your body language around someone without even realizing it, shrinking yourself to avoid being perceived as a threat. That's the moment you realize, the deepest power dynamics aren't in the room, they're in your reflexes. Social hierarchy explained bluntly, it's not just about who has the title. It's about who people defer to in moments of uncertainty. Sometimes it's the person with the loudest voice. Sometimes it's the one who says almost nothing but has the power to kill an idea with a raised eyebrow. And if you want to know where the real power lies, don't watch who talks. Watch who gets listened to without resistance. Once you start mapping these connections, you also start seeing the ones who operate in shadows. The influencers behind the influencers. They never take center stage, because being in the spotlight makes you a target. Instead, they work through others, nudging, suggesting, planting seeds. And by the time the idea surfaces, it looks like it was yours. That's game theory in real life, staying invisible while directing the board. Manipulation tactics don't always have malice attached. Sometimes they're survival strategies someone learned when they were powerless. The person who withholds information. Maybe they grew up in a place where knowledge was the only thing they could control. The one who dominates every conversation. Maybe silence was used against them once. Understanding the why doesn't excuse the behavior, but it keeps you from thinking in terms of heroes and villains. The real survival mindset isn't about beating everyone else at their own game. It's about knowing the game exists and deciding when it's worth playing. You don't have to fight every battle. You don't have to call out every manipulation. Sometimes power comes from stepping out of the current altogether and letting people exhaust themselves while you stay anchored. Street smart skills kick in when you can navigate both worlds. When you can operate inside the dynamic without becoming trapped by it. That means knowing when to align, when to oppose, and when to disappear. It means learning how to read people not just for their tells, but for their patterns over time. One conversation can be misleading. 10 interactions will give you the truth. The hardest part is realizing how many of your past choices weren't really yours. The job you didn't go for because someone subtly hinted you weren't ready. The friendship you let fade because they made you feel replaceable. The relationship you stayed in because leaving meant losing a whole network of shared connections. These weren't isolated moments. They were outcomes shaped by invisible structures you didn't even know you were part of. And the moment you step outside those structures, people will notice. They might pull you closer, try to reassert influence. They might ice you out to remind you of your place. That's the test. That's when you see whether your new clarity can withstand pressure. Because every power dynamic has a cost, and the cost of seeing clearly is that you can no longer play along blindly. Sometimes, breaking free means you stop getting invited to certain rooms. Sometimes, it means your voice is no longer safe for people who thrive on control. And you have to decide if the freedom is worth the loss. That's not a simple decision. That's not a movie moment where the music swells and everyone claps. It's quiet. It's uncomfortable. It's you sitting alone, realizing you've traded belonging for autonomy. But here's the strange part. Once you've lived outside those invisible walls, you can't imagine going back in. You start building different alliances. You stop chasing approval from the wrong people. You choose spaces where influence is shared, not hoarded. And that's when you start to understand how to win in life isn't about dominating others, but about refusing to let the wrong structures dominate you. Because the real power isn't in controlling the board. It's in knowing when to walk away from it entirely. And maybe the most dangerous thing you can do is realize that you've been holding the ability to redraw the game all along.